Okay, let's talk a little bit about Greenland here. Given how much difficulty I had with it, I probably can't give you very much in the way of a useful review if you ain't me. I had so much problem assessing the information present in the game state that basically what I can say is that this game is just beyond me in terms of being able to play it at any effective level. I'm going to get so hung up on not being able to understand what the fuck the game is trying to tell me about its, the current situation, to be able to form strategies to win, or to really look at it as a story, or to pay attention to any any historical value to the narrative, or any lessons to be learned about the colonization and then death of the people who moved to Greenland during the little or prior to the Little Ice Age, during the warming spell, whatever. That said, I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with it as a game. It's just more than I could cope with. My guess is that people who do like heavy Euros would not have this deep revulsion to what it's trying to hand you. And what it is trying to hand you is actually in some ways more interesting than what your normal heavy Euro does. So let me touch on some of the facets. First of all, you got cubes. Not much you can say, in terms of components. Not much you can say about cubes. They're cubes. They work fine. And you got little plastic discs. They're fine too. No problem there. Except that the black ones melded in with my table. But who has a black table? The white ones are more likely to be a problem. You're more likely to have like a white kitchen table or something like that. These dice I did not like, I did not open, I have no interest in them. They're cheap dice that, were able to be provided in this game. It gives you a number that you probably could use. I would prefer smaller dice and chose to use smaller, equally unappealing dice to maintain my mood on it. And because I had a few more of them as well, I have quite a few more of those. Sometimes you need to roll more than the 6 dice that are available. The cards are one of the big problems for me. They are very, very busy with information. Much of it icon-based, some of it not particularly visible, to me at least, even when I'm kind of getting familiar with the game and know what should be there. In particular, trying to find one of the examples. This was my real bugaboo. This particular icon up here. Some of these are very clear. This turns 3s to 1s on hammers, but wherever the archer was, that was very, very difficult for me to see. But there's a lot of information on these cards, and too much for me to cope with, at least on a first play. And the problem is, because that first play becomes such a miserable experience, and because the event cards that come up have so many impacts on them, each of which has to be looked up in the rolls, another factor that ends up decreasing my initial enjoyment of the game. And there's no real means of sort of intuitively looking and seeing, gathering much of the information. It's not like this is supplemental information. This is the information on the game state, is contained largely on those cards in a busy and complicated fashion. it makes it very difficult to get into the flow of the game, which is sort of the minimal level at which you can start deciphering that information and understanding it. There's enough steps in the game that there's just many different levels of information in the game between the sequence of play, the complexity on the cards, the overall assimilation of all the information that you have in your tableau or whatever that's on the board that you have to keep in mind, that it makes it a very, very high barrier to entry on the game. And I don't think that there's anything that could be done about that. That is the nature of the game. It's trying to express some complicated facets using a design concept that, these cards that form into a tableau, that gives you all kind of modifiers that you can look up all over the place, that even start out fairly complicated, because at the beginning of the game, you have one of each type of elder, which means one of your cards, and the second time playing this gets easier, there's no question, has 6 different functions on it that are marked by a cube being associated with that, or multiple cubes possibly, that give you the capabilities on them. So even at the very beginning, you have a bunch of capabilities available to you, maybe more than you will later in the game, all kind of jammed into one card, and it's just hard to keep track of or even notice that you have certain functionality and capabilities available to you. That's probably the biggest single barrier in the game to me, is the presentation of that large amount of information spread out across a number of cards. I don't do well with those kind of games. Maybe some people do. Like I've mentioned while playing this, I was able to handle Magic, but that was a very slow ramping up to where it got anywhere near this level of complexity, and quite honestly, it never got to this level that I was playing. There may be more now. I know that there are a lot more powers and abilities, but in general, each card has maybe 1 or 2. It's not like you have something that can do everything in the game. And in this, there's cards that have 4 or 5 different things going on in them that you have to pay attention to. And it's a very hard to jump into that level. It's kind of like there's a number of games that have incrementally gotten maybe to this level of complexity. As you add to things, Cosmic Encounter comes to mind as one. But even that, you generally just have a few things at any one time that are applicable. Whereas here you're having to check all your things to see if you have a special ability on it. Then there's the rules, which are written in sort of a Euro fashion, by which I mean, some of it's Euro fashion with all these icons in there. They become kind of necessary. The only way you can find the complexity of the cards is by flipping through the rules to see if you can find that picture somewhere that applies, because you might not be able to determine what it means otherwise. The bigger thing that I had a problem with is that they're procedural in nature. They tell you, okay, you're at this point in the game, this is what you do. That makes it difficult to pull out the governing principles through the game and get used to what they kind of are. I'm not sure if there really is a good set of first principles that could have been designed first, spelled out, and then show you how they apply in each special case. But it's this it's not building on a tradition that I'm used to. It's although you can see the origin of this style as you work through the Eklund games. And quite honestly, I liked the earlier designs that he had a lot. Some of that might be my mind state. My brain is not as elastic as it was, 20 years ago or whatever. And but also I feel like more and more is getting crammed into each card, each little piece, and less is relying on things that we kind of have as a shared experience. The biggest being looking at a map to see physical localities as to how you can get from point A to point B. I would have a lot easier time with a map with settlements on it, and sleds give me a certain distance, and boats give me certain capabilities to move around on that map. That's not what we have here. What we have is a set of cards that maybe the same kind of feeling, the same kind of effect is present, more or less, but it doesn't strike those intuitive notes, so uh, it becomes yet another burden to learn rather than something that just kind of links in with, yes, that makes sense because of A, that I can see directly in front of me. The seeing directly in front of you now is these sets of cards spread out across everywhere with lots of information on each card. That really is what you're trying to establish as your information. And I just have more difficulty when the information is presented in too innovative a fashion like that. Now, there is also the simple case that these cards, the icons on them graphically aren't necessarily sticking out the way they should. Maybe the size of the cards could be a little bigger to give you more oomph to what they're pushing out. Of course, that would decrease one of the great advantages of this game, which is you can carry this thing, to a coffee shop and play it there if you're comfortable with it, if you don't have to learn it. It would be harder to learn in a noisy environment. There's no question of that. Harder to concentrate on what's what. If you have it completely internalized somehow, if you've played it 20 times, whatever, and it's become your favorite, it's not going to be too big a problem. Now, to be fair, this is the first edition of the game. There's been 2 more editions that I'm aware of. It's quite possible that the component issues have been cleared up. I doubt that the amount of information that's present on a given card has been reduced. First of all, that would take away from the game. Secondly, that's not the way that Eklund is moving. He's been moving more and more towards putting more and more information on cards and making you try to combine and connect those cards. So if you're a modern Eklund fan, you probably will be okay with this. You won't suffer what I did. I ran into my barrier, I think with Origins, and basically everything that's come since then has become more and more card-based, and more and more of the information that once could have been put in a more intuitive fashion has been kind of ingrained into these icons on the cards. That one was a particularly problematic one because I don't even understand what he's trying to represent with it. Tinkering with brains and shit like that. And I think Neanderthal has the same issue, to tell you the truth. But this one, I kind of get what it's all about. I just don't get the ability to absorb the information necessary to play the game with any degree of not having to examine every card on every choice. I can't internalize the information that's available quickly enough. And I have my grumps about that, but that's something that's actually more general than just him. So, what is there to kind of like about it? Well, first of all, each player has different strengths to begin with, which aren't necessarily obvious. Again, you have to be able to internalize that game state to understand these different strengths. But if you can get to that point, you can see, well, some people have the ability to hunt in certain, to hunt better, or to deal with metalworking better, or whatever. They also have different capabilities from the daughters, which is a particularly interesting thing because those capabilities you can offer to other players in marriage, or they can be taken from you through the Sabine raids. So that's kind of a neat little facet to it. The capability to maybe try to do something a little harder to gain a longer lasting effect from one of the cards. You're able to take certain cards and turn them into domesticated animals or into an idea that, it becomes a technology essentially. You have to have the right kind of elders to convert that. The whole thought, the whole way the monotheism polytheism works, where in terms of a game choice, I'm not sure how much I believe the reality, but he has his explanation for it, of course. Where basically you have to give up a lot of your capabilities to make the switch to monotheism, but there are definite advantages to it. It's probably easier to get victory points, and your victory can't be stolen from you by turning you into a monotheist. You hold a power that you can kind of convert other players, which can become a very very powerful hammer at the end of the game if they're working towards the polytheist victory conditions. You might be able to take that away from them and knock them down right away. So there's a lot of interesting combinations of gameplay there. One of the things that you have to keep track of is some of the bonus cards do the same thing as others. So, if you have an axe or you have a sword, they're both going to help you in combat, raid situations, whatever. And maybe they'll help you in the same way where you get the same dice conversion off of them. And that makes sense. It's just it's not inherently obvious when you're trying to pay attention to all the cards and their modifiers and everything. Again, information that would have been easier to see. Hey, I got a weapon. A weapon is all I need. That gives me this capability. A weapon does X. No, it's expressed through an icon that tells you which dice you convert, and then you have to look and see, am I getting the same thing off this other card that I'm trying to convert? So that's one of those, first principles. If you told me weapons do this, right, then I only need one weapon, right? Instead, I have to derive that by looking at what the specific icons are on the card, comparing it to other cards that are out there, and making decisions as to what I'm going to get. I don't know. I get the feeling that if they could get to the point where they're able to access the information about what the board state is, this would be a fun game. The problem for me, though, is that startup cost is too high at a point when there are just far too many games out there. Like I had said a couple of times at least, if this was 20, 25 years ago, I probably would have been all over this game, and it may be may have become one, not a favorite, because it still is this card representation, which is always going to be a hitch for me. But it might have been one that I took a certain enjoyment in and wanted to bring to other people. Right now, it's one that I'm just like, yeah, it's just not worth the effort anymore. It's not that I have necessarily a desire for immediate gratification or whatever. It's just there's an overload of so many things, and I can only touch each game so much. And the barrier to entry prevents you from getting to the point where you can actually enjoy this one. For me, Um, and there are enough Eklund designs out there that I'm not sure, how many do you need, right? Because in terms of gameplay, they come out about the same, and I don't feel like the narrative really shines through when you're playing this card tableau game. I never felt like the narrative really shined with Magic, which I love, or with Dominion, which I played tons of and liked. It's just not a way that I pictured. Maybe it works better for some other people, but I feel like a bunch of cards just does not provide that. What it provides is a mechanism for interesting gameplay. And in this case, I feel like the barrier is too high. And the subject matter. The subject matter is interesting enough, but isn't sort of, and again, it's because of that intuitive link, not connected and grounded well enough for me because of how the information's being presented. That subject matter then becomes something that sort of feels other, right? Believable, perhaps historically accurate if you're playing the survivalist game. Certainly not in the base game. And the survivalist game may just be too harsh for anybody to enjoy. I don't know. That's one thing that I would have liked to have investigated. But when the narrative becomes that hard to access, the same way when the gameplay is that hard to access in terms of, can I play this effectively or not? Well, then I've taken away one of the couple major enjoyments I have. In this case, it's taken away both. The competition of the gameplay is too obfuscated, and the narrative is too obfuscated. And it falls into, even though you could say, Jesus, it's an Eklund game, it can't. It falls into that realm of the abstract, complex Euro that is just, designed to kind of be impenetrable. Designed to throw hurdles in your way. And again, if that's what you like, this is your game, man. It throws lots of hurdles. It makes the icons difficult to perceive off the board. It puts them so tightly together. It allows you to, pull combinations out of your ass or whatever that you're only seeing because you have an eagle eye that can see those items on the cards, and then you can assimilate all that information very quickly and whatever. So that could be very attractive there. I'm not sure with the narrative. I'm not sure that people can draw that out of the cards easily. I've never really seen anybody playing a card game like that who's like really, really excited about what the story that it's telling actually is, and all about that. You might see people who make the argument that it's historically based and it's well grounded and everything, and it's so thematic as opposed to linking directly to the topic in a way that you can perceive it and understand what's being told, right? And I feel the same way with the big thematic games like Arkham Horror and stuff like that. I should be able to get myself a bottle of whiskey if I want a bottle of whiskey. I shouldn't have to draw for one. That kind of stuff is just a little weird. But anyway, that's what I can tell you about it. I would look into see if the components are better in the later editions, if you're at all interested in it still. And if you're like me, I would say stay the fuck away from it, because it's just gonna challenge. It's putting too much barrier into that, trying to understand either the narrative or the gameplay. With an overload of little bits of information that you have to kind of piece together from all kind of places, from all kind of different cards and whatnot. All right, that's all I can say. Something else.